Hey, welcome to the briefing. What I'm going to cover with you today is this. Before you blame the reviewer, inspect the permit intake. I want to take this one into public sector operations because permitting is one of those environments where the delay everyone complains about may not be where the failure actually started. The applicant is frustrated, the contractor's waiting, the business owner wants to open, the developer wants a timeline, the elected official wants an answer, the portal shows activity, staff have touched the file, the complaint lands on a manager's desk, and the first explanation forms quickly. The reviewer is taking too long. Maybe the reviewer is taking too long. That happens. Reviewer accountability, timelines, and public service matter. A permit should not sit because one person failed to move it. Let me be clear about that. This is not a defense of slow review, but it is also not leadership to blame the reviewer every time a permit stalls before you inspect the intake handoff that put the file into the review system. That is the part I care about in this briefing. The delay does not always begin when the reviewer opens the file. It may begin when the portal accepts an application that is not actually reviewable. It may begin when the checklist fits a standard project, but not the permit type submitted. It may begin when the applicant receives an automated confirmation that sounds like review has started, while staff are still trying to determine what the project requires. It may begin when the file gets routed across departments, but nobody owns the first blocking issue. From a distance, all of that can collapse into one complaint. The permit is stuck, but that complaint may hide the real failure point. That is where close-up analysis matters. Close-up analysis is the discipline of getting close enough to inspect the exact part of the process where the application, checklist, routing, ownership, applicant communication, and public-facing status stop matching each other. It is not a broad read. It is not staff need to work faster. It is not the portal needs to be better. It is not departments need to communicate. Those statements may contain some truth, but they are too broad to correct the intake problem. The sharper question is this: where exactly did the permit stop moving with clarity? Think about that for a second. A permit application is not just paperwork. It is a promise of process. Once an applicant submits, they expect movement. Once the system assigns a number, they expect review. Once payment is accepted, they expect the agency to know what happens next. Intake is where public expectation becomes government work. A permit number is a signal. A payment receipt is a signal. A status line is a signal. If those signals say progress, but the file is really waiting on clarification, the department has already created the wrong expectation. I have learned to respect that kind of handoff because public sector work carries a different kind of pressure. It is not only workload, it is trust. A permit delay can affect a resident's home project, a contractor's schedule, a small business opening, a developer's financing window, or an elected official's inbox. When the process is unclear, people do not experience that as a technical detail. They experience it as government not responding. Picture a growing mid-sized city. We will call the Development Services Director Elena. Her department manages building permits, zoning review, site plan intake, trade permits, inspection coordination, business occupancy approvals, and routing between planning, building, engineering, fire, utilities, and code compliance. The city is growing. Small businesses are trying to open. Contractors are competing for labor. Residents use the online portal more often, but they still call when the status does not make sense. The department moved more of its permitting process online after years of paper-heavy work. That helped. Applicants can submit faster. Staff can see more history. Documents are easier to store. But the portal did not remove the pressure. It changed the shape of it. Now applicants can submit faster than staff can clarify, screen, route, and review. Some applications are complete, some are not. Some should never leave intake. Some require one department, some require several. Some applicants upload the right document in the wrong field. Some choose the general permit category correctly, but the project triggers additional review they do not understand. That is a familiar public sector tension. Make the process accessible, but keep it complete. Move the file, but protect compliance. Serve the applicant, but do not shortcut safety. Respond quickly, but do not create false confidence. The problem is that all of those pressures meet at intake, and over the last month, complaints have increased. Applicants say their permits are stuck. Reviewers say too many files are incomplete. Front counter staff keep answering the same status questions. Planning says routing is inconsistent. Engineering says files are reaching them before basic site details are ready. Fire says access comments are being added too late. The city manager wants a cleaner answer. A council member asks why a small business build-out has been sitting for weeks. Now Elena has to read the situation without getting pulled into the easiest explanation. The newest issue involves a storefront conversion for a local business. The applicant submitted through the portal. The system accepted payment. A permit number was created. The applicant received an automated confirmation. The portal status showed submitted. From the applicant's point of view, review had started. That is a reasonable assumption. They followed the visible process. They paid the fee. They got a number. The system responded. Inside the department, the file looks different. The floor plan was uploaded, but the use description was vague. The site plan did not show one required access detail. The trade contractor information was incomplete. The fire review trigger was unclear at intake. Planning had a use question. Building had a plan question. Fire needed one detail before completing its part. Engineering did not need full review, but no one clearly marked that out. The file moved between departments, but the applicant did not receive one clean correction path. 3 weeks later, the business owner calls frustrated. They are trying to open. They have money tied up. Contractors are waiting. They do not understand why the permit is not moving. From their side, the city accepted the application and then went quiet or confusing. From the department side, staff believe they are waiting on missing information. Now, the first fix feels obvious. Tell reviewers to clear the file. Tell staff to update the applicant. Tell departments to communicate better. Tell the applicant to submit the missing items. Each of those may be reasonable, but Elena notices something important. This is not happening across every permit. It is clustering around small business build-outs, change of use requests, and multi-department reviews. That pattern matters. When the same delay keeps appearing at the same intake point, the leader should inspect the handoff where the application became government work. This is where leaders either protect the process or chase the complaint. Chasing the complaint feels productive because it produces motion. You can call the reviewer, you can push the queue, you can demand an update. But if the intake handoff is the actual failure point, motion is not enough. You need the detail that explains why the same kind of permit keeps stalling. And so Elena gets closer. She does not rely only on the portal status. She walks the permit from submission to review. The applicant selected the correct general permit category, but the project also triggered a change of use review. The portal accepted the packet because required fields were filled. But required fields are not technical completeness. The contractor information was partially complete. The business description was vague. The zoning use category was not confirmed. The fire access detail was not visible. The application moved into review. Planning flagged the use question. Building flagged the plan detail. Fire could not complete review without the access information. The applicant received comments in separate messages. The portal still showed the permit as under review. The applicant thought the city was still reviewing. Staff thought they were waiting on the applicant. Now the issue is clearer. This was not only reviewer speed, it was intake clarity. The permit entered the system before the process defined whether the file was reviewable, what review path applied, who owned the first blocking issue, and what the applicant needed to do next. The delay did not begin when the reviewer touched the file. It began when the application entered the workflow without a clean intake decision. That is the difference between a short read and a useful read. A short read sees a delayed permit. A useful read sees the point where the file stopped matching the process it was supposed to follow. And that is the leadership test. Are you reacting to the permit delay because it surfaced as a complaint, Or are you inspecting the intake detail that created the delay? Once Elena gets close enough, the small things become operationally important. The portal required fields, but not enough project-specific clarity for certain permit types. The intake checklist worked for standard permits, but not for change of use work. The confirmation email sounded like review had begun. The reviewer saw an incomplete packet. The applicant saw a submitted permit. Planning needed the use clarified first. Building needed revised plan details. Fire needed access information before final review. The applicant received several comments, but not one clear sequence. That is how public frustration forms, not always from one dramatic failure, from small details that are individually explainable and collectively weak. And this is also why tone matters when Elena talks to the team. She does not need to walk in angry. She does not need to protect the department either. She can say, "We are not going to pretend every delay is a reviewer problem. We are going to find out where the file stopped being clear." That is calm. That is direct. That is fair. It keeps the standard high without turning the first person near the file into the whole failure. Portal status, permit type, required fields, completeness screen, routing trigger, department ownership, correction language, review clock, applicant update, that is a stack. And when the stack finally shows itself, the reviewer becomes the easiest target because the reviewer is the person everyone believes is holding the file. But the visible person is not always the whole cause. Now let's be fair without getting soft. Reviewers are not operating inside a clean packet every time. They may receive files that are missing details, uploaded in the wrong place, labeled poorly, or routed before the review path is clear. They must protect code, safety, zoning, access, and technical requirements while meeting public expectations for speed. If the file arrives incomplete, the reviewer may spend review time doing intake recovery. That is not real review. That is rework. Intake staff are under pressure too. They deal with applicants who want movement, contractors who know the system, residents who do not, nervous business owners, and departments that all need different information. They may be expected to screen applications using checklists that are too general for the project. They may know something looks incomplete, but not have the authority or technical depth to pause it cleanly. And the applicant is not living inside the department's routing logic. They do not always know the difference between submitted, accepted, complete, routed, under review, waiting on applicant, and ready for approval. If the portal accepted payment and assigned a number, they may believe the city has what it needs to review. That belief may be wrong, but it is understandable if the system does not explain the difference. That is why permit intake is not just an administrative step. It is a public service control point. It protects the applicant from false expectations, reviewers from incomplete files, departments from working out of sequence, the public timeline from hidden friction, and the agency from trust damage. When leaders only inspect one side, the correction gets weak. If Elena only tells reviewers to move faster, the department may improve one permit, maybe. But the next applicant may still submit a packet that looks complete to the portal, but not to the reviewer. The next reviewer may still inherit an unclear use category. The next department may still add comments out of sequence. That is the cost of fixing from too far away. A broad speed message will not fix a detailed intake failure. A faster reviewer will not fix a file that should not have moved past intake. A portal upgrade will not help if the status language creates false confidence. A correction letter will not help if it does not tell the applicant what to do first. A permit delay cannot be corrected cleanly until the leader knows where the process stopped moving with clarity. So what does Elena inspect? She inspects the sequence that turns an application into review work. Application type, required fields, document upload, confirmation message, completeness screen, routing, first blocking issue, correction notice, applicant response, review clock, and status update. Then she asks where the process loses control. Does submitted mean what the applicant thinks it means? Does intake define complete before routing? Does the checklist match the permit type? Does one department own the first blocking issue? Does the applicant receive one clear next action? That is not bureaucracy for its own sake. That is public service discipline, and here is the discipline. Do not ask the reviewer to absorb a broken handoff and then call that accountability. Accountability starts with a clear file, a clear path, a clear owner, and a clear status. When those are missing, the reviewer may still have responsibility, but the process has already loaded confusion into the work before review even begins. The most important detail may be the definition of complete. To the portal, complete may mean all required fields were filled. To intake, complete may mean the required documents are present. To the reviewer, complete may mean the file is technically ready for review. To planning, complete may mean the use category is clear. To fire, complete may mean access information is visible. To the applicant, complete may mean the city accepted payment. And if each function defines complete differently, delays will keep repeating. Complete sounds simple. It is not always simple. A file that is complete enough for submission may not be complete enough for technical review. A file that is complete enough for intake may still need zoning clarification before the rest of the review can move. If the process does not make that distinction clear, staff and applicants will keep working from different realities. That is where leaders need precision, not blame, precision. Another detail is the correction path. What happens when something is missing? Does the applicant receive one clear correction notice or separate comments from multiple departments? Does the notice say what blocks the next step? Does it distinguish must-fix items from later comments? Does it use plain language, or does it read like an internal review note pasted into a portal message? Does the applicant know what to do first? A correction is not useful if the applicant cannot tell what action is required. This is where public sector leaders need to pay attention to the applicant experience without lowering the standard. The agency does not need to approve incomplete work. It does need to explain what must be fixed. Another detail is the review clock. When does the clock start? At submission, at payment, at intake acceptance, at technical completeness. If staff and applicants understand the clock differently, trust breaks early. That is not just an internal tracking issue. That is a public expectation issue. Now, what does a controlled correction sound like? It does not sound like reviewers need to move faster. Maybe they do, but that is too broad. It does not sound like applicants need to submit better packets. Maybe they do, but that does not fix the handoff. It does not sound like the portal needs improvement. That may be true, but it does not name what the portal has to clarify. A controlled correction sounds more like this. For change of use permits, intake will complete a project type screen before routing the file to technical review. That is specific. Or the confirmation message will distinguish submitted from technically complete, so applicants understand what the status means. That is specific. Or a small business buildouts will receive one consolidated correction path that identifies the first blocking issue. That is specific. Or planning will own use clarification before building and fire spend time on a file that cannot move yet. That is specific, and that is the difference between talking about service and controlling service. And let me say this directly. You do not protect public trust by hiding intake ambiguity behind reviewer blame. If the reviewer sat on the file, call it. If the reviewer missed the timeline, call it. If a department let a permit sit without action, call it. But if the file was incomplete, the permit type was unclear, the routing path was wrong, the correction notice was confusing, and the applicant believed review had started because the system said submitted, then the process has to own its part of the failure. That is not excuse making. That is control. A strong department can tell the truth about where the intake handoff failed. A weak department turns every complaint into a person problem. This is where leaders need to separate reviewer delay from intake ambiguity. Did the reviewer sit on the file, or was the file never complete enough to review? Did the applicant fail to respond, or did the correction notice fail to name the next action clearly? Did the portal help the applicant understand the status, or did it create false confidence? Do not protect slow review. Do not hide intake ambiguity behind reviewer blame. Separate them. That is how trust improves across the process. Applicants can trust the status. Reviewers can trust the packet. Departments can trust the routing. Leadership can trust the timeline. The public can trust that the agency knows where the file actually sits. That is what public sector maturity looks like. Now let's bring this back to the practical read. If the portal says submitted but staff say incomplete, the public-facing status and internal readiness are not aligned. If the applicant thinks review has started, but staff are still sorting the packet, trust damage has already begun. If correction letters list comments but not sequence, applicants may not know what to fix first. If every delay becomes a reviewer complaint, the agency may be avoiding a close-up look at the intake handoff. The biggest warning sign may be this: everyone is telling the truth from their own position, but the permit still stalls. The applicant says they submitted. Planning says the use is unclear. Building says the plans need revision. Fire says access information is missing. Staff say they are waiting on the applicant. The applicant says nobody told them clearly what to do next. All of those can be true. The leader has to inspect where those truths were supposed to connect. That is the value of close-up analysis. It gets you close enough to see the mismatch, not to blame faster, to correct more precisely. Elena does not need to inspect every permit in the city. She needs to inspect the repeating failure point, small business buildouts, change of use requests, and multi-department reviews that keep stalling near intake. That is the pattern. That is where she puts the read. She can walk one or two examples, find where the application type, checklist, routing, correction notice, and status language stop matching the work, then correct the detail, producing the delay. Maybe the correction is a clearer completeness screen. Maybe it is better project type routing. Maybe it is plain language correction notices. Maybe it is department ownership of the first blocking issue. Maybe it is reviewer accountability. The point is not to guess. The point is to inspect enough to know where the correction belongs. That is what separates public service from process noise. A delayed permit is noise if you only argue about who is taking too long. It becomes signal when you inspect where the intake handoff stopped protecting the process. So before you blame the reviewer, inspect the permit intake. Ask what looks like reviewer delay because the applicant is waiting. Ask what may have started earlier in the application type. Checklist, completeness screen, routing, correction notice, or status update. Ask whether submitted means what the applicant thinks it means. Ask whether complete means the same thing across intake, planning, building, fire, and the applicant. Ask whether the first blocking issue has one owner, then decide. Do not ignore reviewer accountability. Do not ignore applicant responsibility. Do not ignore public timelines. Do not ignore compliance, but do not fix from too far away. The reviewer matters, the applicant matters, the checklist matters, the routing matters, the public timeline matters. But permit intake is where those pressures connect. If the same delay keeps repeating there, do not stop at the complaint. Inspect the application, the checklist, the routing, the correction notice, the ownership point, and the status language. Then decide what actually needs correction. Do not blame from a distance. Use close-up analysis. Find the failure point. Move with control. Thanks for listening to the briefing.